Hello there. Hi, I am Dee and I will be introducing you to a new topic in soft skills today. The topic will be listening. There is a difference between listening and hearing. Most people only hear and not listen. Thus, today I will be enlightening you about the concept of listening, its process, types, barriers while trying to listen properly, how to overcome it, anatomy of poor listeners, and features of a good listener. Let us go the next slide and see what listening means. Listening is the ability to accurately receive and interpret messages in the communication process. Listening is key to all effective communication. Without the ability to listen effectively, messages are easily misunderstood. The listening process involves 5 stages: receiving, understanding, evaluating, remembering, and responding. These stages will be discussed in more detail in later sections. Basically, an effective listener must hear and identify the speech sounds directed toward them, understand the message of those sounds, critically evaluate or assess that message, remember what's been said, and respond. Thus, listening equals hearing plus comprehending plus interpreting plus responding. Now, let us go through the process of listening. Process of listening. The process of listening is quite a simple one and shows in detail how actually we listen to the information given to us. 1. Sensing/selecting, listener selects, from among multiple stimuli, the only one that seems important. Hearing is the first essential step in the listening process and relates to the sensory perception of sound. The listener further processes the perceived sound. For learning to be effective, hearing needs to be done with attention and concentration. 2. Interpreting, decoding. The next step involves sensing and filtering of heard sounds. The heard message is categorized as wanted or unwanted, useful or useless. The unwanted message is discarded. In this step, the sense of judgment of the individual comes into play, that is, the filtering process is subjective and a person chooses to retain what makes sense to him. 3. Evaluating. The next level of listening consists of comprehending or understanding. The listener understands or interprets what the speaker has tried to convey. This activity can be described as absorbing, grasping, or assimilating. In order to grasp the meaning of the message, the listener uses his knowledge, experience, perception, and cognitive power. The verbal and auditory message is coupled with nonverbal communication to understand it. 4. Responding. For listening to be complete, a response is important. Responding to a message may take place at the end of the communication, immediately after or later. When it is stored for future use, the response may take place later. However, if there is a need to seek clarification or to empathize with the listener, it may take place earlier. Responding may also take the form of prodding or prompting in order to show that the message is being received and comprehended. 5. Memory. No matter how brilliant a speaker is, most listeners can retain only 10 to 25% of a talk or presentation the day after. Remembering relates to a process whereby the assimilated message is stored in memory to facilitate future recall. Remembering assumes significance because many times messages received are meant not for immediate consideration but for future use. Types of listening. There are different types of listening according to the sincerity, occasion, relation with opposite person, etc. Let's go through the same. Informative listening. Primary concern is to understand the message. The next step beyond discriminating between different sound and sights is to make sense of them. To comprehend the meaning requires first having a lexicon of words at our fingertips and also all rules of grammar and syntax by which we can understand what others are saying. The same is true, of course, for the visual components of communication, and an understanding of body language helps us understand what the other person is really meaning. In communication, some words are more important and some less so, and comprehension often benefits from extraction of key facts and items from a long spiel. Comprehension listening is also known as content listening, informative listening and full listening. Attentive listening, goal is to understand and remember what they are hearing. Involves holding eye contact, nodding, having good posture, and mirroring the speaker's body language to show genuine interest in what they are saying. In addition to these nonverbal cues, you must also allow the speaker to finish their thought in its entirety. Relationship listening. Sometimes the most important factor in listening is in order to develop or sustain a relationship. This is why lovers talk for hours and attend closely to what each other has to say when the same words from someone else would seem to be rather boring. Relationship listening is also important in areas such as negotiation and sales, where it is helpful if the other person likes you and trusts you. It's either to help an individual or to improve the relationship between people. Therapeutic listening is a type of relationship listening. Appreciative listening. In appreciative listening, we seek certain information which will appreciate, for example that which helps meet our needs and goals. We use appreciative listening when we are listening to good music, poetry, or maybe even the stirring words of a great leader. Listening to music, to speakers because you like their style. Critical listening. Critical listening is listening in order to evaluate and judge, forming opinion about what is being said. Judgment includes assessing strengths and weaknesses, agreement, and approval. This form of listening requires significant real-time cognitive effort as the listener analyzes what is being said, relating it to existing knowledge and rules, whilst simultaneously listening to the ongoing words from the speaker. E.g., judge hearing a case. Discriminative listening. Discriminative listening is the most basic type of listening, whereby the difference between different sounds is identified. If you cannot hear differences, then you cannot make sense of the meaning that is expressed by such differences. We learn to discriminate between sounds within our own language early, and later are unable to discriminate between the phonemes of other languages. This is one reason why a person from one country finds it difficult to speak another language perfectly, as they are unable to distinguish the subtle sounds that are required in that language. Likewise, a person who cannot hear the subtleties of emotional variation in another person's voice will be less likely to be able to discern the emotions the other person is experiencing. Listening is a visual as well as auditory act, as we communicate much through body language. We thus also need to be able to discriminate between muscle and skeletal movements that signify different meanings. Barriers to listening. It so happens that while listening there are so many barriers that affect the listener. They are listed down below. Excessive talking. Good conversational skills are an asset, and a person with these skills are more likely to achieve professional success. However, talking more than necessary is a barrier to effective communication. People hesitate to interact with a person who talks excessively without listening to them. They may also get bored, and excessive talking may be perceived as aggression. Prejudice. Prejudice is a preconceived opinion of feeling, which is usually irrational. Prejudice is very dangerous and has the potential to bring animosity into the team and to break team spirit. The reason for a prejudice may be the speaker's race, religion, age, or appearance. A prejudiced person will not make any effort to listen and understand. Distractions. The four main types of distractions are physical, mental, auditory, and visual. Expecting others to share your personal beliefs and values. Everybody has their own personal beliefs and value systems, and it's natural to want to apply them to others around us. Learn to appreciate that others don't have to share your beliefs. In fact, their unique perspectives may shine light on problems and issues that you haven't been able to deal with before. Misunderstanding. The inability to hear correctly is one of the many reasons for misunderstanding what a speaker is trying to communicate. You may think that it's impolite to ask the speaker to clarify his words or intentions, but that's not the case at all. Most people will appreciate the fact that you are making a focused effort to really understand what they are trying to say. Interrupting. Interrupting a conversation with improper body language or inappropriate words will have a negative impact in effective communication. Faking attention. The person who is faking attention is just hearing but not listening. There may be some eye contact and the person may even be nodding, but the mind is elsewhere. The person may be thinking about what to have for lunch or what to wear for the party that evening. Faking attention is a habit for some people, but it conveys lack of respect and dishonesty. Bringing in emotions. Emotions erect barriers to effective communication. A listener's senses are not likely to be functioning at their optimum level when he or she is angry. Likewise, it is not possible to understand or appreciate what the speaker is saying if the listener is excessively sad. Noise. Noise is any unwanted sound. It is a great impediment to clear communication. It is impossible to listen in a noisy environment. It becomes a frustrating experience for both the speaker and the listener. Fear. Fear is a great barrier to listening. People who are afraid during a conversation are not likely to listen. They become defensive and tend to argue. Now, let's check how to overcome these barriers. Overcoming listening barriers. Although there are barriers in listening, there are a few ways through which one can overcome those barriers. They are as follows. Have a definite purpose for listening. Decide which of the three purposes fits the particular situation in which you are the listener and then listen with that specific purpose in mind. When you have purpose, you will be attentive. Have a prior background of the topic. Knowledge creates interest. If you find out something about the topic, it will amazingly make you more interested. When you have a good knowledge of the topic that is going to be presented, then you will pay more attention to it. You know the basics. Pay unquestionable attention to what is said. When it comes to attention, give your unquestionable attention so that you can understand the topic only and you don't miss out any points. Providing your unquestionable attention, you will be thorough with the topic. Be effective in taking notes while you are listening to the topic. Be effective in taking notes. By taking notes, you will be able to recollect what you heard, and it will also be at phone in retrospect. Keep away the prejudice and personal opinions while listening. One should keep away one's perceptions and prejudice to be able to grasp what the speaker has to say. If we are not doing so, then the message speaker wants to pass on will not reach to us in the same context. Be emotionally stable. Being emotionally stable while listening to any speech is at most necessary, because when we are emotionally unstable, we are more engaged in stabilizing that rather than concentrating on what has been spoken. It may also happen that your emotional instability hinders the entire audience. Analyze the discourse into its basic elements. While listening to the speech, one should try to analyze the discourse from its basics. By doing so, one will be able to connect to the basics of the topic. Allow the speaker to complete the speech. One must allow the speaker to complete his speech. If you have any doubt, you must address the speaker after completion of the speech. By doing so, you will give a fair chance to the speaker to express himself. Now, we will see how to identify the poor listeners in the group. Their characteristics are as follows. Anatomy of poor listeners. Tunes out if delivery is poor. A poor listener will be inattentive if the speaker is not effective. He will start thinking about things other than the speech and may also distract his neighbors and break their attention too. Tunes out dry subjects. If the subject is boring and less interesting to the listener, he will stop paying attention to it and start doing something that interests him. Rehearsing. It is also harmful to be too attentive. Sometimes after listening to some phrase, the listener starts wondering on it. While doing so, he misses out the next few lines that are said by the speaker and breaks the flow of understanding. Listens casually. There are a few listeners who listens casually. They will pay some attention in the speech, will be busy doing their own stuff. This way they will be aware about the topic partially. Takes extensive notes. Some people like to note down main points during the session. But sometimes it may happen that they are so busy writing their main points that they miss out the rest of the speech. Shows no attention. There are a few people who are asked to attend the speech forcefully. This type of people will not pay attention to what the speaker is saying and will be doing their own distracting activities. Gets distracted easily. If you want to spot out a poor listener, try doing something that is apart from the speech. The people who get distracted with that act are poor listeners. They get distracted via small things. Lacks concentration. You will notice that some people lacks concentration. They will be very attentive at the start but will lose concentration at the later stage. Listening for a point of disagreement. When one is listening to the speech with the point of view of disagreeing with the speaker, he will receive the message wrongly. We will try to disturb the environment by questioning the speech and raise a counterpart. Tends to enter into argument without complete comprehension. You might have noticed that there are some people who tends to get into arguments without even knowing what the complete scenario is. This type of listeners are poor listeners and then negate the environment. Does not show interest in difficult material. There are a few people who are very interested in learning small and simple topics but run away when difficult topics appear. They always feel it is not their cup of tea and tries to avoid it. Tends to entertain daydreams with slow speakers. There are a few people who tries to entertain their neighbors or daydreamers by the whispering small jokes or some different comments on the speech. By this the speaker is also getting disturbed and the neighbor will also be inattentive. After seeing how to identify a poor listener, let me state the features of a good listener. Features of a good listener. You're in the here and now. Often, we're not really in the moment when we're listening to someone. While the other person is still talking, we have already jumped to conclusions. We are miles ahead of what the person is telling us. We're already piecing together our response. Good listening means that you stop your inner monologue and truly give your full and undivided attention to the person who is talking. Shine an imaginary flashlight on that person. All the light, your focus is on the person talking. Distractions don't stand a chance with you. Even if it seems so simple, listening is not that easy. And that's the problem. Listening is hard work, but it has the reputation of being a nearly effortless job. So much so, that we might be tempted to do something else while listening. No, a listening brain can't write a text message at the same time. You know that preventing possible distractions around you is crucial for listening. You are all ears. You put your phone away, close your laptop, and turn off the TV. Now's not the time to show off your multitasking skills. You're curious. Interest is an essential element of listening. It might seem like a paradox that your curiosity and interest could have declined, especially for those who are close and important to you. The problem is that we start thinking we already know everything about that person. We begin overhearing the new within the old information. In a conversation, you are the detective. You gather information and are keen to discover more about what your counterpart feels and what he or she is moved by. No matter how much you already know, there's always more to discover. You're sincere and open-minded, you don't judge prematurely. We are skilled at evaluating things and making up our minds quickly. This is normal and most of the time it's useful. In listening, however, a rash opinion kills the conversation. While our counterpart hasn't even finished their story, we might be thinking, well, I would have done that very differently. In those moments you're not really listening anymore. A good listener has learned to postpone these reactions to the end of the conversation. Otherwise you'll miss out on the fundamental feelings of your counterpart. You won't be able to understand or empathize with his or her point of view. Your senses have good reception. Trembling hands, raised eyebrows, tense shoulders, our bodies are also speaking, and they should be heard. Nonverbal communication is an important part of what is being said. All your senses should stay tuned to get the full message. But, not only that, listening is not a passive endeavor, it itself is active. The body language of a good listener answers with eye contact, an understanding nod, facing the person who is talking. You ask the right questions. Listening does not mean sitting there in silence. In the right moment, it makes sense to reply, to communicate that you are listening. A good way to do this is by paraphrasing. So, what you're saying is, should become an inherent part of your listener's toolbox. This way, you're not only giving your friend attention, you're also making sure that you really understood what the other person was trying to say. What we say and what we mean can be worlds apart. It's helpful to confirm that you're still speaking the same language. You accept other opinions and can dial back your own. When heated topics are debated on TV shows, those defending their opinion fight hard to be heard. Those debates usually turn into monologues, one following the other. No one is actually listening to their counterpart, even though we know how important it is to pick up each other's ideas in a debate. Unsurprisingly, no one changes their opinion in the end. When we listen, we get a peek of our counterpart's world. Even if it doesn't align with our own worldview, it's fundamental to stay interested and attentive. We can learn so much, especially from those who don't share our subjective opinion. They are the ones who can truly give us new input if we choose to take advantage of the opportunity. You don't interrupt. Let's be honest, sometimes we're part of a conversation where we're impatiently anticipating the thought or feeling someone else is struggling to express. It seems so enticing to just finish the sentence, to pace things up. Patience is a virtue, this goes for listening as well. A good listener understands that language is a complicated method of transportation for thoughts and feelings. Your counterpart needs this pause because it's not always easy to find the right words. It's not a race. Take your time. You stay authentic. We all know them, those who just don't stop talking. Sometimes the conversation is so one-sided that there comes a point where you just can't keep listening. Here, it's okay to interrupt someone. Nobody has to endure a conversation. That's not what listening is about. We can only have genuine interest in a conversation, if we also allow ourselves to stop. You don't fool yourself or others, and you don't listen just because you don't know how to end the conversation. You know your limits. A good listener recognizes where his or her abilities come to an end. This will become exhausting for you and won't be healthy for your counterpart. Psychotherapists are professionally trained to listen and watch out for signs that communicate the need for more help than your lending ear could give. It can be extremely difficult to know when this point has arrived. One indicator could be that mood swings have become more extreme, or don't swing back. Or maybe your friend's usual strategies to tackle everyday demands aren't taking effect anymore and he or she is left feeling helpless and stuck. When the struggle has become so severe and the situation seems hopeless, it is time to seek professional help. By this I end the session for today. I hope you found it informative and helpful. Thank you.